From deep within our hidden volcano laboratory, a podcast about gaming from the people who bring your games to life. These are your core elements. Core Elements, episode 65, recorded on September 4th, 2014. Good Lord, it's been a couple of months since I've done the show. One would think that I had gone pod dead, and I sort of did, but I have decided to come back from this with one of my favorite guests of all time. I've got Mike Rugnetta from PBS Idea Channel.
Hello.
And it is so great to have you on. And
it's so great to be here.
When we were talking about stuff that we wanted to talk about, like I got more excited. I think we've got a lot to cover. And I always love your show. It's for those who don't know, Mike, why don't you tell them about your show?
So I make a YouTube show. It's called Idea Channel. I make it with PBS Digital Studios, and it's produced by this production company here in New York called Kornhaber Brown. And we apply like philosophical and critical concepts to things sort of in the popular culture canon. So we ask strange questions about stuff that you never maybe thought to ask strange questions about, and then kind of reason through what the answer might be, maybe.
And I've noticed
it's all about trying to look at media and culture in weird and different ways. And
some of the episodes that I usually reference when people are asking me about your show is I reference the Is Doctor Who a Religion one, which is probably
that's usually the one that I say first too.
And then I point at the Is Homestuck This Generation's Ulysses.
All right.
Because I find that Homestuck as a concept is so obscure, and to take it and put it on something so with such literary power behind it, to me, was both like daring and ballsy and a little bit ridiculous.
And ridiculous, yes. I'm glad you added the ridiculous. Yeah, and it's also, that's quite the 1-2 punch to be like, oh, it's this show. We talk about, Doctor Who. People are like, okay, yeah, Doctor Who. They're like, oh, and also Homestuck. And I would imagine that most people don't maybe know what Homestuck is.
And it's funny because like for a while there, like I've actually stopped watching YouTube videos a lot lately just because I've been working really hard. But like for a while there, your show between you and oh my God, and I can't think of it right now. CGP Grey. If ever there was a video you guys did, like it was the one that I had to watch immediately, usually because there was some element to it that was like universal and compelling. And I know I know those are terrible words to use. They're very bland and they're overused, but I still think that they mean something.
Well, that's I think that's one of the premises of the show, is that what we try to do, what like when I'm like putting these weird ideas together, the idea is that we're looking at something that's really small, like a very small feature of culture comparatively, but you end up getting to big stuff through the small stuff, right?
What is your favorite episode of your show? Like,
oh, geez.
Because you've never been asked that question, I'm sure.
Never. I go back and forth. Right now, I think it might be the unboxing video that we did.
Okay.
About unboxing videos.
Okay.
For a while, it was the Jurassic Park episode. Jurassic Park being a warning about capitalism.
Yeah, I thought that was excellent.
But those two are the ones that I look very fondly upon.
Well, and usually when I do this show, I invite somebody in who's part of the gaming industry directly, but I like the way that you think. And just like I had Michael Pachter on once, and I like the way he thinks about gaming, even if he's not in the core nuts and bolts of it. Like, gaming is a big part of the things that you talk about. How do you view gaming in the context of your show?
Well, I mean, it's, I think it's just as much a feature of popular culture as the other things that we talk about. I see it very much alongside television and movies and comic books and literature and, all the other stuff that comprise not only popular culture, but the, cultural landscape as a whole. So I think not talking about it would be weirder than talking about it. It would be this huge part of the set of things that we have tasked ourselves with covering.
And I actually read an article this week that now says middle-aged women are the largest gaming demographic.
I read, or are they the largest? They at least outnumber what was it, male gamers younger than 18 to 20?
Yeah. Yeah.
I read that too.
And I'm fascinated by the very idea that our culture has actually gotten to a point where more people are gaming than aren't.
Man, I mean, I wonder if that's, I wonder how true that statement is, but it is certainly, it's really easy to defend the idea that it certainly feels like gaming is either it already is or is on the verge of becoming, that massive feature of entertainment that these other things are.
Did you ever see the movie Bob bit where he talked about how like geekiness and nerdiness used to be on the outside, but now we've gotten control, like we're no longer a minority input into the medium, and like we aren't being bullied anymore. We're the ones doing the bullying because we have control of like all the popular movies and everything that are coming out nowadays are based on the things that used to be considered obtuse and on the outside, and now we are the major element of modern media.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think there's a popular narrative of the slow, or really, I guess, very fast in the grand scheme of things, nerd takeover of most industries, and the narrative of now nerds are the ones who rule the world.
Yeah.
I feel empowered. From my pinpoint perspective, it's nice.
Well, I guess let's move on.
Nice. Really, sorry.
Oh no,
I was
go
going
ahead.
to say what's nice is that it's nice. It's nice to be able to like things, and I think that is really the big thing that has happened, and that is maybe what people are seeing a more effusive expression of.
Yeah.
That right. It's much easier and more acceptable. You don't have to be cool and be removed from stuff. That
Right.
It's actually, we're in a moment now where it's really cool to like things, and it doesn't matter if all of the things that you like don't really match up with one another. You can like this vast and seemingly unrelated constellation of things, and that now is almost the cool thing.
Yeah. And I'm also fascinated, you look at the attendance of things like PAX and DragonCon and Comic-Con, and you see like more mainstream people digging into what was considered this very odd and obtuse subculture. And I think that's fascinating as well. I think more people are approaching fandom as a natural expression of the things that you like.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on to the show. Lab notes. So just as a quick interlude, I want to remind everyone also that I am a Loot Crate affiliate. I've been putting out videos on my YouTube channel of some of the unboxings that I've done. I should be releasing one the day I'm recording this of my children and their cousins joining me for the villains unboxing. And I have the heroes unboxing that I need to do shortly with my kids, but I've been busy with packs and stuff. If you want to help support the show and get some cool swag monthly from Loot Crate, just go to lootcrate.com/Wes Wilson and sign up. You'll help support me, and the more that I get, some people affiliating through me, I might be able to work into getting some more affiliate sponsorships. So go to lootcrate.com/Wes Wilson. You can get really keen things like little Nord figures from Skyrim. You can get great t-shirts like this great Jokey t-shirt that I got, a combination of the Joker and Loki. And so go to lootcrate.com/Wes Wilson, support me, support the show, and get good stuff. So as far as gaming goes, I actually kind of put it down for a little while. I got into a state where I really was not very excited about any games that were coming out or any games that I had available to me. And so I kind of got into some doldrums, and I started, like, I've been MMO'd out forever and ever and ever. but I picked up the Secret World because a lot of my local friends were going to be playing it. And I was all excited about it because I've always loved it and I never dug into it very far. And then all of a sudden, I totally obsessed on it. After months of saying I'm MMO'd out, I got into an MMO and I just sat there and fixated on it for probably about 2 months. Now, at that point in time, my kids got 2DSs. And in order to feel like I had access to what my children were being involved in, I got my wife to get me a 3DS XL for my Father's Day and birthday presents.
Ooh.
Yes. And I picked up and I borrowed A Link Between Worlds from
it's so good.
Spencer.
I really liked it.
I really, like, I cannot describe how much simple joy I got from that title. It was,
Yo, dude, that is exactly it. Simple joy.
It was clean. The puzzles were solid. I didn't feel like I needed to go to the internet to find some obtuse piece of information that I needed to fix anything with. And I consumed it voraciously and felt like it tapped into something very old. And I wasn't even comparing it to Zelda 1 because my memories of Zelda 1 are a little flaky anyway.
I just remember slogging through the desert. That's my main.
And being frustrated when you wanted to walk through one screen and had to fight 5 monsters to get through it. But in A Link Between Worlds, I would fight through 5 monsters and enjoy it. And so it was really an experience. And I don't know if I can adequately describe how awesome it was. And it got me so inspired, and I picked up Ocarina of Time 3D, and I started playing Twilight Princess on my Wii, and then next thing you know, I'm poking around with it. It really invigorated me and made me feel happy to be gaming again. And so if anyone ever is feeling sad, that's what I recommend for you. Pick that one up. So as the interesting evolution of that, I started playing Ocarina of Time and Twilight Princess, however, and I forgot how annoying and obtuse some of the puzzles in those games could be. And I had such perfect memories of Ocarina of Time, and now I'm just like, really Ocarina of Time? Really? And I mentioned it.
I remember having that feeling. I remember being very frustrated at what Ocarina of Time expected or asked me to do, which is very strange considering the fact that now when I play Dark Souls, I'm like, yeah, you want me to do that? All right, cool, I'll do that. And Dark Souls asks you to do absurd things.
Well, but I mean, like, for instance, I get to this one area and there's a giant fish. And I remember that somebody had said to give them fish, but like I'm sitting there trying to hold up the bottle. Like I'm doing stuff, trying to figure things out, but I'm holding it up to the wrong person and doing all kinds. And eventually I'm having to look things up on walkthroughs and I'm like, this is not where I want to be. I don't want to be here. So like it's kind of funny because, and then I mentioned it, Seth Bling, who does Redstone Minecraft videos, and he's like, thank you. He goes, everyone worships Ocarina of Time, and some of the stuff is so obtuse and so stupid. And I'm like, yes, I agree with you. I'm with you on that. One of the other things I picked up recently, my friend Nivicaris got us together for a game of Borderlands 2, which I had put down for a long time. And I had actually gotten very disinterested in Borderlands as a concept. And playing it again reminded me how great of a game it is now. And so when I went and checked out the Borderlands prequel game that's coming out soon at PAX when I was there, it was really awesome and I was really excited about it. And then I went and looked at the Telltale game that's coming out, the adventure Borderlands game, and I'm excited about that. And so I have to thank Kevin for getting me excited about Borderlands again. There's something about it that feels very natural. Did you play any of the Borderlands games?
Oh, dude, the Borderlands games are amongst my favorites.
What is it?
That is Borderlands. I think Borderlands 1 is only one of maybe 3 or 5, for like a very small number of games that I finished and then immediately started playing from the beginning again.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, I finished the campaign and then just went right back to the menu screen and started a new game.
Well, I've started playing Borderlands 2 again, soloing it with the character and doing it in Vault Hunter mode, and the sheer amount of bullets you have to pump into anything to kill it. It literally feels like there were certain enemies that I just felt I had to launch my body at enough times till my dying corpse would kill them by falling on them.
Yeah,
so.
And therein lies the beauty of Vault Hunter. Yeah,
Meat Boy a la. So, and then the last thing I've been poking around with really is I finally got around to playing The Wolf Among Us. I
still haven't played that.
Well, I was a big fan of the comics.
Yep,
love the comics, and I loved playing the first chapter of the Walking Dead game.
Yep.
And so I knew I would enjoy this, but I haven't. And while I am supremely enjoying it, there's something about it that feels more constrained than the Walking Dead game. The Walking Dead game, even though I feel like it didn't give you as many open world kind of options as it pretended it did when it introduced itself, I felt like it had them. Whereas in The Wolf Among Us, I make decisions that are supposed to be affecting how the game works out, and I'm not sure, like I don't feel like I have that many choices.
You feel like you're on rails?
I do.
Like you're more on
to a degree.
I had to stop playing the Shadowrun, the new Shadowrun game, because I felt like I wasn't doing anything meaningful.
Yeah.
That I was just being carted around from location to location.
Yeah.
So, but here's my question about The Wolf Among Us, which is that for me, the Walking Dead game was so difficult to play. It was so stressful.
Yes.
It was a level of stress that, or a quality of stress that I have in my real life. Not that I'm battling zombies and have to deal with cannibals, but like, you know, this negotiation of a group of people working together and managing feelings and all of
Yes.
this other like collaborative stuff in a tense situation. There were moments where I had to. What I'm trying to say maybe is that the Walking Dead game was very real for me.
Yeah.
Even though it was the zombie apocalypse. Is The Wolf Among Us, does it have that same just like impossibly difficult attitude?
No. And I'll explain. The Walking Dead game made it feel as if the mere act of distributing candy bars among individuals in the game was of supreme and unquestionable importance.
This is the most important. Who gets the candy bars is the most important moral decision in a game or real life that I will make today.
Exactly. And no, The Wolf Among Us does not have that. It feels more like you're shaping the character of Bigby than you're shaping the fate of the world. So
the future is in your hands with these candy bars.
Exactly. No, it does not have that. But I felt the same way about the Walking Dead game. There were points where I'm like, I don't need this kind of stress, man. You know. But no, I've been enjoying it, but it feels much more tame and much more lightweight. It is still really, really good, and I feel like I'm part of a narrative, and I'm sure that what I'm reading is something that I read in the comics portrayed slightly differently, but I don't remember them well enough because I read them about 5 years ago, and I don't remember them well enough to remember if this was a part of the story or not. So I'm also kind of happy about that. It keeps me in the dark. So tell me about what you've been doing. Oh, do you want me to talk? Well, we'll save talking about PAX a little bit. Why don't you talk about what you've been doing lately?
Yeah. So gaming wise, so I recently finished a playthrough of Earthbound. I finally went back to Earthbound that I realized halfway through playing it that I had maybe never actually finished it. That I had this idea in my mind that Earthbound was one of my favorite games as a kid, and that I had played through it, and that it had this great impact on me. But then I got to a point playing it, last month, where I realized that I was looking at things that I had never seen before, and so I had, both because of the subject matter of Earthbound, which I read very much as being a child in an adult's world, except represented by bizarre monsters and strange otherworldly situations, right? Like it is the world, but it also is not the world. And I remember having that sense as a kid, that like I had this experience of being the age at which I would have originally played Earthbound again, not only because of that aspect of the game itself, but because I was kind of forced to confront these invented memories from that point in my life. So it was like a really kind of weirdly intense, sitting down to play this game that I knew that I liked, wanting it to be this casual thing that I would just do over the course of a couple months, and then ended up being this deep dive into being a child in the world.
Do you think that like nostalgia does evil things to returning to games? I know that like when I went back,
I will say that my experience of playing through Earthbound now, having played it from beginning to end over the course of it, maybe like I work a lot, so I don't sit down. I can't sit down and play games all day. So it took me a couple months. But my experience of it was 100% positive.
Yeah.
I have zero complaints. I'm so glad I did it. And it is as good, if not better, than I remember it being.
Okay. Because I know that, like, trying to return, especially to childhood cartoons, things like watching Thundar the Barbarian and remembering how cool and edgy it was when I was a kid, and then, like, watching it now and seeing it just basically being this spew of Hanna-Barbera nonsense.
And you're like, nope.
Yeah, exactly. So like, and there are other games like that. Like, I did replay Star Control 2 as early as like about 8 years ago, but I'm almost afraid of picking it up again because I don't want to sully it.
Right. I kind of have that with Star Fox 64, which I played through probably about 5,000 times when I was a kid. And I almost don't ever want to play it again because I want it to remain, even if it is still good, I want it to remain that thing that it was when I was younger.
Yeah. There are certain things that seem like they need to be experiences at a point in time in your life, and your memory of them is better than anything you could recreate.
So then actually kind of building on that a little bit, I finished Earthbound, and I thought, well, that was such a great experience. What are the other games that I am willing to replay and give another shot? So right now I'm working through Chrono Trigger. And then after Chrono Trigger, I'm going to play through The Secret of Mana, which I remember just loving like there was no tomorrow. And I'm actually surprised. So I really loved Chrono Trigger, as one does and should. But I experience now far more frustration with the... I don't know. It's not really a travel mechanic, but kind of how you have to navigate the landscape and the way that it forces you, the way that you are expected to travel back and forth in time, and the unclear order of operations. That Chrono Trigger to me now feels much more like a road movie almost than it does an adventure video game, which was my experience of it when I was younger. Well, it's all about the travel and the figuring out where to go next. Whereas when I played it as a kid, it all seemed very clear and like a list of things to check off, like an RPG usually is. Go to the place and get the thing, go back to the place, yada, yada, yada.
Well, I think that happens with a lot of stuff. Like I remember, like my memories of the Ultima games, I'm sure would not stand up in comparison to what we're used to in our media today. I think there are certain, our acceptance of what is good game mechanics has evolved with the emergence of new game mechanics, and old gameplay styles that seemed logical and powerful and poignant at the time now seem really trite and pointless.
That's interesting because weirdly, I can't, when I sort of started to develop this idea of that while playing Chrono Trigger, I could not help but draw a comparison to Gone Home. Which, have you played Gone Home?
Yes.
Right. So it's like there are certain points in Chrono Trigger where I feel like the thing that you are supposed to do, period, is wander around this place for a while. And that's very much what Gone Home is. Gone Home is just wander around this place for a while.
Yeah.
And you will something will eventually happen. You will eventually, maybe even accidentally, trigger the right order of people to talk to, things to look at, yada yada yada, that will cause the game to then move forward or show you where to go next.
Yeah.
So I wonder if maybe what you said is like kind of hyper true, that it's like like those things don't play now, and so of course the more adventurous indie game developers might try to resurrect them and bring them back.
Well, I think that's obvious with Tim Schafer trying to bring back the adventure game.
The adventure game,
Yeah. I mean, I when you look back on adventure games and the basically the giant matrix of taking all the items you have and combining them with each of the items that you have and hoping
for hours.
Yeah, and hoping that the combination, because the example I always use that a lot of people don't remember is that in one of the original Zork games, you got a gray brick.
Oh, dude.
And it was C4, but there was nothing, no clues anywhere that made you believe it was C4. But because why would I think I had C4?
Why would you? Yes, yeah, especially in that game.
Yeah, and so like, and I was supposed to stick a fuse in it and light it and blow something up, but it was one of these things where basically I had to find it out by endlessly combining all the items. And that's how adventure games used to be. I think the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy text adventure game is a good example of this because none of the things that you combine even make sense. You know, put the dangly bit into the no-T, you know, stuff like that. And it's wacky, and I don't think I want it anymore. But at the same time, like, I started poking around with an adventure game. I can't. It was Jack Keane and the something. I got it free with something, and I found myself again in this adventure game zone, and it had like this certain degree of nostalgia that was pleasant, but at the same time, it's like, I don't know. I just
I'm an adult now. I don't have time for this.
Exactly.
Let me tell. Are you a Minecraft player? Or?
I am.
So there's shades of acceptability of a stand around and manage the inventory.
Yeah. I guess we can talk a little bit about PAX because I know you were interested in it.
Yeah, I wasn't able to go. I mean, I've only ever been to PAX East. I've never been to PAX Prime, but I'm always really curious to hear what people's experience of PAX is because it's such. I mean, like you said, it is such a huge setting with so many different groups of people and so many different agendas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like I find myself as a person working with YouTube and streaming personalities, like we have a lot of work. We have a lot of work to do at PAX. I really only got a chunk of Monday and 1 hour on Saturday to go around and explore things, because I had to be at certain places at certain times. For those who don't know, one of the things I'm doing right now is I'm working with Mindcrack, which is a group of YouTubers and streamers. I'm sort of a project coordinator for them, and it also means that like I need to be very active in the things that they're doing on an administrative and as a support side. You know, so I'll be the guy at the meetup who has the t-shirts, who's selling the t-shirts, or I'll be there to make sure everyone's bags are okay while they're doing signings and things like that. I'm kind of like a PA. But so and then additionally, there's a lot of networking that has to go on. It's funny. I consider myself to be a very D-list celebrity on the internet. There are people who know me. I sometimes get approached for signatures, but I'm not. I'm not A-list. But at the same time, like if I go to Minecon or I go to PAX and I see these A-list celebrities, they're all like, Wes, and everybody's happy to see me, and it really is very heartwarming. And it also makes me feel like I need to be doing more front of the camera stuff to try to, like ensure that Wes Wilson, the podcasting and YouTube personality, does not languish in me being Wes Wilson, the Minecraft project coordinator.
I will say you do have the beard and hair for it.
Yeah. But at the same time, like I kind of stepped away from in front of the camera because I think there's some ageism. I think in the gaming community, there's a little bit of ageism. I don't think
really. I mean, that's I've never heard this before. That's interesting.
Well, my reference frame is different.
Yeah.
My musical tastes are going to be different. I'm a very young at heart kind of person. I listen to very modern music, but at the same time, like I can't tell you there was a time when I was in high school where I could tell you every single television show that was coming on every single channel at every single time. Like you pay attention to your media that is provided to you, and it is not buried in mountains and truckloads of media from previous years, and you're able to filter it and store it more properly. And I don't have that anymore. And I'm not sure how many people still laugh at Ghostbusters references. You know what I mean? Or I mean,
that it sounds like what you're saying is that there's a degree of relatability that is sometimes hard to produce.
Yes.
Simply because of both time progressing linearly and the amount of time that people have in their lives to watch and play things.
Yes. And then additionally, there are when there are large groups of young people together, there are certain memes and ideas and thought processes that begin to evolve. Like this whole senpai thing that's been going around lately with my,
how many people did you notice?
I just am not, I'm not getting it, and the you what mate thing, and it's just not, it's not hooking me, and I think it might have a little bit to do with my scope of experience. I'm really good about not telling the kids to get off my lawn, but it doesn't mean that I understand everything they're saying in their tweets, mm-hmm. and so like I did kind of, in particular, I'm trying to step a little bit behind the camera in order to minimize the way that affects my participation in this medium. But at the same time, like I do want to like not let Wes Wilson languish as a personality. So, I had to touch base with a lot of people, but it's really great. Like, I don't know how much you're up with the big Twitch streamers, but like, Bacon Donut is just the superest, nicest guy in the whole wide world. And he came up and gave me a big hug, and Giant Waffle, who I've barely had any interaction with, like looks genuinely excited to see me. And I'm like, this is awesome. That I'm a part of this community. And it also means that like the Twitch booth at every single PAX ends up being the seed for all journeys around PAX. You start there and then you move out. And the things that are the farthest away are the biggest leaps and the longest journeys to get to.
Right. So I'm super not hip with the Twitch scene. Is that a huge feature of PAX? The Twitch person, I forget exactly what phrase you used. The Twitch personality, the Twitch streamer. Is that a reason people go?
Yes. And there are a lot of
that is so cool.
There's a lot of, there's panels and fan meetups and all kinds of really, great things associated with it. One of the things that Twitch did was they found out all of their partners that were coming to the con, and they made a big poster of them. By big, I mean, travel size.
Poster size poster.
Yes. And you could get them for free, and then they would have these signing sessions, and if you got all the signatures, you could be entered into a contest. But it gave people the chance to like have a piece of media that they could then use kind of as a memory thing, kind of like an autograph book. And it was really kind of awesome. And like Twitch is doing it right. YouTube doesn't show up at any of these PAXs or anything. And I don't know why they're not, their number one YouTube personality is a gamer, and they're not getting into this environment and promoting it.
Right.
Twitch has this huge, probably $1 million booth at every single PAX, and YouTube doesn't even have a desk anywhere.
Huh. Well, I mean, didn't YouTube did they just buy Twitch?
No. Actually, we're going to talk about that a little bit in the news. So we'll talk about that in a second.
I was just one of the things I've been talking about or thinking about a lot lately, and there's going to be an idea channel about this in 2 weeks, in a week, I think, which is about how popular culture now does not rest on the necessity of something being numerically popular. And I think that Twitch and like Twitch personalities are such a perfect example of this, that these are people who are drawing crowds to a con that they have to pay to go to, They have this massive following. They're on this website that has huge value, a booth that has, a massive presence. Yet me, the guy who like works on the internet every day, I've never heard of these people, right? These are like, this is like very clearly, to me at least, it seems like this is definitely a feature of popular culture that remains I don't want to say unknown, seems like a value judgment that is kept from like the world at large in a way that I don't think has happened before. It's so interesting.
Well, I think it's also reflected in like, okay, so I wore this shirt that says Twitch broadcaster on it to the grocery store.
Right.
And no one says a word to me. And then I walk by a kid and his eyes just go wide.
Like, yeah.
And so like, I think it's a subculture thing as well. It's like when I have the shirt that was on, I think it was on one of the daily t-shirt sites, but it has the Eye of Sauron and the ring, the One Ring as with little smiley faces and they're holding hands.
Yeah.
And watching the people who get it versus the people who don't is kind of a litmus test of which culture they're a part of. And I think we are getting more of a differentiation of various cultures that people can participate in that some people are just completely oblivious to.
Right. And the number of people participating in that thing is massive. And it's just surprising to me that number can be so large, and there can still be such a huge portion of the population that's never heard of it.
Yeah.
And I think that's only possible in a situation where those things are not being produced by Warner Brothers,
yeah,
Fox,
yeah,
right? Because those things they're going to make sure that everybody knows about this thing,
yeah,
because they have marketing dollars, and by God, they're going to use them,
yeah.
And I think we think of that thing as popular culture. But I guess the idea I'm working through with you right now, so thank you, is that this other thing, right? Like Twitch is just as much popular culture. It just doesn't have Warner Brothers like marketing brains behind it.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's what I think. I think that's what I think.
It's about to have Amazon marketing brains behind it.
All right.
So we'll talk about that in a little bit. Now, one of the things that I, in particular, wanted to do is that there were a lot of indie game devs who, for those who don't know, I really I have gotten very active in attempting to have open conversations about sexism in gaming and sexism in fandom, because, I'm instrumental in making conventions and I'm instrumental in, talking about gaming. And there are some people who are bringing up some very good points. And the more research I've done on it, the more I'm saying, yes, this is a real and significant issue and we need to address it. And I noticed that you had a series of tweets recently that were attempting, and like, for instance, JonTron got into kind of a tete-a-tete with Tim Schafer about these things, and I'm still amazed at the kind of kickback on the idea of open discussion of these issues. What kind of response have you gotten from these tweets? And do you want to tell the audience a little bit about what you were doing?
Yeah, sure. So I just, there's, I don't know exactly how much Gamergate really covers, but whatever word you want to use to describe the current situation that gaming is in, right? There's a lot of conversation about representation and sexism and misogyny and the importance of criticism in video games and how to respond to those things sanely and effectively, and how to move gaming forward in a way that is, like you're saying, welcoming for everyone, right? That's the idea, is that if someone is uncomfortable, that's not good for gaming, because we want it to be successful and thriving. And so what I was trying to do was, I understand that there is a lot of ire for people like Anita Sarkeesian, Feminist Frequency. And I was really curious about where it comes from, other than this place of hate. Because there's a lot of hate. There's a lot of people who seem to just flat out hate Anita Sarkeesian, and critics who are like her or who support her. And so I was wondering, I was really trying really hard to figure out if there are reasoned arguments behind the dislike of Anita Sarkeesian. And so I asked people, I said, I don't understand. Someone tweeted at me and said, no one deserves death threats, but Anita Sarkeesian is so full of shit. And my question was, could you please explain to me how Anita Sarkeesian is full of shit when what she does, from my perspective, is describe what actually happens in real games that do exist? Like, that's what I see her function. As a critic, that's what you do, right? You point at the assumed foundation of things and ask whether or not that foundation is self-evident or based on other things that we view as invisible. And so a lot of people responded, thankfully, very, very reasonably, and saying like, well, I disagree with Anita for these reasons, or I disagree with Anita for these reasons. And I think that the way that she views these things are wrong or incorrect. And so I tasked myself with this was, and I will admit right up front that this is a huge dick move. So huge, like this was on purpose a huge dick move. I tasked myself with refuting every single one of those reasons for disliking what Anita does in the length of one tweet. Which includes not only the response, but the statement of dislike itself. So really half of a tweet.
Yeah.
So there are. I think I did the most recent one today. It was the 6th one, and so there are 6 tweets that state what people see as being wrong with the work that Anita Sarkeesian and people like her do, and then a response about how I see, at least, that reason not having a logical basis, not being sound. You can just dislike someone. That's fine.
Yeah.
I'm not claiming that you're not allowed to not like people. That's okay.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, the amount of ire that exists around this group of critics and journalists is not just, I just think they're just not for me. Like, if that were the case, no problem. That's okay.
And that's kind of where I am. Like, I actually followed Feminist Frequency a long time ago, and I thought that there was a lot of very positive things she had to say. Now, do I universally think that what she's saying applies to everything in the whole wide world? No, I do not. But her taking small things like the evolution of the Lego audience. That video that she did that talked about the evolution of the way Lego was marketed and produced, to me, is a sincere criticism of something that is real.
Yeah.
The fact that my son thinks that there are girl toys and boy toys.
Yeah.
And I have had nothing to do with that. And I have told him his entire life that there are not girl toys and boy toys. He has picked this up by consuming the culture of toys. And I think the only way that you can really do that is through the marketing and the way that your friends do stuff. But I haven't really seen a lot of this interaction with his friends that are saying these are boy toys and girl toys. So my natural thought process is these thoughts are coming from the media that promotes these toys.
Yeah, there's a process that is very complicated and to a certain degree involves a huge number of people that don't even realize they're involved.
Right.
That represents and reinforces, like, this is the way things are. Right.
Yeah.
That's ideology. That's the thing that just propagates the idea of this is how things are, and it's a very, very hard thing to fight.
Yes.
And I think that's the source of a lot of the complication that's happening is that effectively what many people are asking right now, or what many people are saying, is they're pointing at things and saying, does this thing have to be the way it is?
Yeah.
And then a lot of other people are saying, yes, because that's how things are.
Right.
And then the first group of people are saying, like, but does it have to be? And then the second group says, yes, because that's just how things are.
Right. And
so it's like,
and one of the things that was in Anita's latest video that really stuck with me, that the thing that I viewed this latest one to be one of the best of the gaming tropes videos that she's done. And that's because she makes a couple of points that are just so razor sharp. You know, a lot of the criticism of why women get raped and abused and treated like garbage to make gritty video games is that it makes it look more realistic. You know, and these cultures could not, because, you know, if you look at a medieval culture, women were treated terribly. And her point was, well, wait, we're able to bend the rules and let people have magic and dragons and all these other things, but we can't create a, you know, we can't change that too. We have to make it so that this very triggering, you know, abusive thing towards women has to be omnipresent in all gritty gaming. And I notice it too. Like it's to me, it's troublesome, and yet the people are like, well, that's just rah, 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 rah. And they reject the idea that people should and can be able to say, not in, you know, we don't need this.
So I think there's another side of that same thing, which is that so I'm going to wind up and I'm going to work my way to a point. Is that okay?
Yes.
So there's this Tumblr blog that's really, really good. It's called Medieval POC, Medieval Person of Color. It's very, very good. And the whole point of this blog is to point out that the ideas that many people, especially in the West, and especially people who produce popular culture in the West, have about the presence of persons of color throughout history are wrong. They're not right. That there is this idea that if there were people of color in a certain place, they were slaves, or they were manual laborers, or they were staff, or they were criminals, or they just weren't there at all. And what Medieval POC does is shows artworks and other pieces of culture that display the presence of a wide variety of different types of people throughout the world, throughout history. And it is so eye-opening. And the thing that it makes me think of is this idea that when people point at a certain game and they say it has to be that way because that's how the world is, like even that is maybe not true. That our idea about what a certain point in history looked like, or what the people were like, or what kinds of actions and relationships did, that those ideas themselves are not actually based on history or what happened. It's based on a really complicated set of
tropes,
references, that we're making, that were established by popular culture, that itself is coming from a very particular place.
Yeah.
So I think that's the other. It's like, not only can games be whatever we want because people make them and are allowed to make whatever decision they like, but also the very idea that they are reproducing reality is itself stands on shaky legs.
Yeah. And that's the thing that baffles. And then like there's the whole like, well, if we want to portray how things were, that's just a fact, you know. And I actually had one of the top comments on the Smite discussion that was on the Game Theorists about hypersexualization of women in games. And one of the things that like I pointed out was historical reference is one thing, but we don't have to work within that context. We can evolve past it. We can make decisions on idealizing this idealized version of the past on our own. And we're not required to subscribe to these things just because they were there.
Right, because that's just, that's sign number one that something's wrong. Well, that's how we've always done it.
Yes. And I think, like, the Sarkeesian videos, there was a thing that I shared with you, and it basically was like, there's a website called Games on Net, and basic argument behind it was equality is the worst thing that could happen with this movement.
Right, like why are we like the fact that there's an uproar about this? And
Yeah.
That the upshot that is providing all this vitriol is equality.
Yes.
That seems strange.
Oh no, you have the option to play a female assassin in Assassin's Creed Unity. Oh no!
Right. Or like, oh no, like a non-player character can't be killed or abused in a way that perpetrates, troubling tropes about the way the world does or should work.
Right.
Yeah, like oh no, how bad that is the thing that doesn't happen anymore.
And one of the points I always try to bring up is people are like, well, these individual, if I were designing a game, I should be willing to tell my story in the way that I want to tell it. And yes, the idea in approaching all of this is not necessarily to single out individual games and say we order you to do this. The idea of the critique in general is to point out, much like the Bechdel test. The Bechdel test, for those who don't know, is a test of movies where there needs to be two women in the movie with names who talk to each other about something other than a man. And the goal of that test is not necessarily to say whether any particular movie is feminist or not feminist. The goal
or good or not good,
yes.
I think is the other way that a lot of people tend to, that like if it passes the Bechdel test, it must be a bad movie. That's not really the case.
But it's to point out how little of the media passes this very low bar. It's to say, let's set the lowest bar we could have for female involvement in a movie, and then let's see how the scope of our entire film industry handles this low bar. Because, for instance, like one of the things that gets Sucker Punch passes the Bechdel test, but it's not necessarily the most, feminist movie in the world. And what's going on with the Anita Sarkeesian commentary and what a lot of the people are pointing out is that when we look at our media, at gaming media as a whole, it is failing on certain levels. And you have to point to individual instances to draw examples, which is why in the latest video she brings out Watch Dogs and Mafia 2 and these other games to say, if you see it's happening here, it's to see it's happening here. It's so that the discussion is not necessarily in some idea headspace with no applicable examples in the media that we're critiquing, but it's not necessarily to say Mafia 2 must not do that. And I think that's an important point that most people miss. And it's one of the reasons why I bring up feminism at almost every convention I go to. It's because my goal is that by keeping the dialogue open, people will begin to perceive more that people are concerned about. And the other thing I get a lot is, oh, people are too offended. People are too offended. Don't you believe there are people who are too offended? And I'm like, okay, let's take some of our lightning rods of gaming culture. Let's take Zoe Quinn and the thing that happened with the game jam. Did you hear about that?
Yes, the game jam was a little while ago. That is not the current.
Right, that's not the current thing. But
right.
She became a lightning rod at that point in time because basically what happened is some game designers and some YouTube and Twitch personalities were brought together to help do a game jam, and it ended up being taken over by a group who wanted to turn it into a Survivor-esque TV series, put a lot of money into it, and then began trying to push buttons of sexism and things like that to get more extreme responses from people.
Right, this is like the edgy, the edgy factor to make it more edgy.
Yes, and basically what happened was the people that were on Game Jam rejected it and walked away and killed the whole project. But my question is, don't get me wrong, I understand some people are too offended, but at the same time, here was a clear example of sexism that made Zoe Quinn a lightning rod for sexism discussion, and yet her response to me was very realistic.
Yeah. I think it's also a question of not saying right, those things, terrible behavior has a place in the world, and you would hope that when someone is going to include it in a work of art or media that they are creating, their intention is not to reinforce that practice, but it is to comment on it, criticize it, to
Right.
show that it is bad.
Right.
Like we identify this bad thing and we put it in the game is not criticism, it's reproduction. Right. And the reproduction of the bad thing is not criticism. It's reinforcement.
Right.
It is a reinforcement of the idea that this is how the world works. So that, I think, is the main, when people say like, oh, so are we not allowed to have like bad things that happen in the world in our game? No, absolutely not. Like verisimilitude is a big part of media experience, and that is the way that you show people how you as the creator of media and artworks think the world is and hopefully think the world should work. But we have to be aware of the fact that when we just reproduce these terrible things and don't think about how we are commenting on them, kind of doing more harm than good.
Right. And that's one of the things that I think this latest Sarkeesian video really pulls out is it focuses on the idea that there are certain acceptable kinds of behaviors historically and thematically in media that are centered around the abuse of women. And that it's not that the abuse of women can't be used as a story driving tool. It's just that its ubiquity lessens the impact. One of the comments I brought up in a conversation this weekend at PAX is that the idea of the rape of a male has much more powerful and like totally debilitating foulness to gaming than the idea of the rape of a female. And it's because females are raped regularly in games. But if you were to show a male rape in a game, that's nasty. That's bitter. And so the sheer reproductive quality of these kinds of abuses isn't helping the situation. It's hurting it.
I also want to say, just as almost as a side note, that like, I think we're both definitely coming from a place of wanting gaming and the world to be a better place, and so we have our perspectives, but that we are also two like middle class straight white guys.
Yeah.
So I just want to say that out loud.
Oh,
that like we are definitely coming at this from a place of wanting ourselves also to be better.
Yes.
And wanting, like, working very hard to understand that the message that we are delivering is like, we're not here to be like, and we're gonna fix this.
Yes.
And yada yada.
Well,
yada.
and that's actually a really interesting thing to bring up, because I faced that this weekend. I actually have been trying to get Zoe Quinn on this show for about 1.5 years, and we've been unable to get our schedules together. And about the last 6 months, she's been such a lightning rod that I haven't really even been able to hear from her in email or Twitter. And I do interact with Rami Ismail a lot, who is one of her friends. And so I kept trying to intersect with him and her over the weekend because I wanted to meet her and I wanted to interact with them. And I finally did get a chance to, she tweeted out that she was at a particular party and that it was great. And I said, if I come by there, can I still get in? And she said, yes. Well, I showed up. She was in a very, very intense discussion with somebody, so I didn't really want to bother her. But then, like, I finally went up and I went, hi, I'm Wes Wilson. We've talked over email. And she goes, oh, yes. And I said, I do Core Elements. We haven't really been able. And she's like, oh, I'm sorry. And I'm like, no, you don't owe me any apologies. You got a lot of stuff going on. Don't stress it,
Yeah.
I'm like, but I did want to come up and introduce myself. And of course, she's exhausted. I mean, realistically, she's exhausted from everything that's going on.
I mean, of course, people's @replies are public on Twitter, and so you can see what kinds of hell these, she's has to go through.
Right. I mean,
and that's right, and that's only, that not to diminish the fact that her entire life has been turned upside down.
Yes, and so I actually tried to initiate with a relatively so how's your con? How's your PAX been? Which I thought would be a very neutral statement, but even that was just like, how has her PAX been? It's been very abusive and horrible,
Yeah.
And so she's like, it's PAX. And I was like, okay. And so she says, I'm gonna step over here for a minute. I told her, I'm like, oh, okay, yeah. But if you get a chance to come over and say hello, please come and say hi. I'd really like to talk with you. And then she walked away, and I saw her on the sidelines. And my natural tendency as a positive energy male extrovert when dealing with someone who is facing a lot of issues is to try and cheer them up, is to try to help fix the problem, to try to be there to say, hey, things aren't so bad. You're okay. Tomorrow's a better day. You know, the world is a great place. But as I walked away, I went, Wes, you can't do any of that. You can't do any of that. What she's going through is not something you can fix. She's got good friends here. You know, you'd be mansplaining to her in the worst possible way and attempting to influence her life by your force of privilege. And so I deliberately had to stop myself from trying to address what she's going through, because it's not my place and it's not my fight.
Yeah.
And I made myself available to her and tried to be respectful of her boundaries and things like that. But, you know, a lot of people don't have that discussion with themselves. And it goes into how they look at media. You know, they want to look at Anita Sarkeesian and say, hey, it's no big deal. Tomorrow's a better day. Everything's okay. Gamers are, for the most part, cool. You don't need to worry about this. But that's trivializing what she has to say and what she has to experience. And that's the last thing we need to be doing. We need to be listening to the people who are putting these arguments forth. Even if we don't agree with it, we have to listen.
And I think that's the thing that it's been, you know, there were a couple people on Twitter who were more than willing to have that like, okay, let's try both of us to talk this through calmly and try to understand the other side. And that's a really refreshing thing, and a thing that I would implore anybody listening to this, no matter what side of the current debate that you are on, as far as gaming is concerned, you know, like just listening and trying to understand from the other person's perspective it's very helpful. It's so helpful.
Yeah, I mean, and really in this particular situation, having these discussions is not going to fix anything. And it's not even necessarily the goal. It's merely to bring the issue to the forefront, in my opinion, so that when people step in to creating, they no longer walk in with kind of these societal tropes in their head. They begin challenging them. They begin challenging the things that they accept as standard storytelling and say, how can we move beyond what has been happening and attempt to do something new?
And I think that happens, yeah, in that situation where, right, you're not just immediately on the defensive.
Right.
You're like, you know, immediately on the defense. And that's the thing that is so terrible about what's happening with all of the threats and all of this other stuff, is that it really delivers the message that if this conversation is going to happen, it's going to happen this way, which is defeating to the conversation, and is, of course, the point that a lot of these people, I think, that a lot of people who are very upset that they are aiming for is to just defeat the conversation, which I would like to think that someone who is invested in gaming doesn't want that to be the case, right? That you can absolutely love games and gaming and also think that they have a lot of work to do to get better. And I think that, you know, yeah, that's an important thing to realize.
And I really like that idea that the goal of a lot of the anger is to defeat the conversation. And that's the one thing I don't want to have happen. I mean, Anita Sarkeesian was run out of her house by death threats. Zoe Quinn had her dad called. You know, someone doxed her dad and had someone call her father. And the goal with this is the same thing as leaving burning crosses in somebody's front yard. It's the exact same goal, which is we will intimidate you into silence and inaction. And people can say all day long, well, I don't necessarily agree with that, but I do want, you know, these social justice warriors to shut up. You know, it's intimidation. And there's a reason why the conversation is gaining in volume, and that is because the points that are being made are getting more agreement. And I think that's why people are rejecting the conversation so much, is that when people start digging into the conversation and agreeing with it, and then the people who don't agree, they go, wait, you agree with this? There's an excellent video that got put out by Jim Sterling called "Quit Using the Term Social Justice Warrior," and I'll link that in the show notes. And basically what he's saying is, I don't agree with everything Anita Sarkeesian says, but just because I want her to be able to say it and not be abused or harassed, that does not make me a social justice warrior. And if it does, I will gladly take on that mantle. So, and I think a lot of people become more reticent. I know I was reticent to address this topic. I have wanted to talk about sexism in gaming for at least a year and a half on my show. But I wanted to talk, I didn't want to mansplain it. I wanted to have the conversation with a woman on board because I wanted firsthand feedback on the things I was putting forward.
Right.
But many of the women that I talked to about this, for instance, I asked Kelly Santiago, who did Journey. I said, this is something that I would like to talk about, but I only want to talk about it if you want to talk about it. I asked a lot of the women that have been on the show, would this be a topic you're interested in talking about? And the problem is that by actually getting into this discussion, you become a lightning rod and a standard bearer for a concept as opposed to an individual. And I think a lot of people get intimidated into silence who even want to talk about this on a very casual level because of all this nasty negativity and the need to turn people into ideas as opposed to three-dimensional thought processes.
Right.
So,
with lives and houses and stuff.
Yes. So we'll just skim over some of the things. I would like to have more discussion about this in the future, and I will have more discussion about it in the future of this show if it's possible. I recognize that a lot of people don't like this issue and that this will be very polarizing for some of my listeners, but I do sincerely believe that this is one of the most important discussions that will be had currently in the genre of fandom, and I want the conversation to continue, and the least I can do is continue to allow my platform to be involved in that discussion, and it will be. So, and
I think it's hard to ignore that it's a big part of what's happening in the media world right now.
Right. So let's move on. Eureka! Ow! So in the news this week, since we've taken so long talking about all the wonderful things we've been doing, one of the things I wanted to share was that recently League of Legends has been facing a lot of criticism for certain things, and I'm going to post a really interesting article that talks about how the League of Legends critics are trying to sell themselves and not necessarily fix the game. And so, I think this is interesting, and it kind of goes into what we've been talking about, and that is that there's a meta layer on criticism, which is by doing this stuff, but by actively approaching big popular media and discussing it, a lot of times you can use that as a tool for self-promotion more than the critique itself is necessarily important, if that makes sense.
I mean, I've seen that leveled at Anita quite a lot.
Yeah,
it's all about she's doing this for fame and for notoriety and whatever. And yeah, I mean, I don't think I buy it, but I
don't. I think that Anita quite clearly is addressing her media, but this Polygon article kind of focuses on how people will use critique for self-promotion. And in this particular case, one of the things that it's talking about is how people critique the League of Legends income model. And the reason they're doing it is because they want to promote their games making more money. So the idea is by saying, okay, the conversion rate of League of Legends players is so tiny, and they should be using the scale of their game to create a realistic monetary income system so that other games that come out will be able to make money. And I find that a really fascinating kind of concept. If League of Legends is doing what it's doing and it's working, why does anybody else really need to dig into that and say, well, I've got to do it either exactly the same way or their standard of payment is applicable to what I'm doing? Does necessarily someone charging a $10 subscription fee to an MMO mean that the $15 subscription fee MMO is unduly wronged?
So clever, everybody.
Yeah. So I'll link to this article because I think it's got some interesting stuff. It's a little bit old because it's been a while since I've actually done the show, but I think it's got some good stuff. So you mentioned earlier talking about the Twitch acquisition, and I've got an article from The Verge that talks about why it makes a lot of sense for Amazon to buy Twitch. And I'm actually really happy about this. For those who don't know, Amazon bought Twitch for $970 million in cash. And there was a lot of hemming and hawing about how YouTube was going to be the one that is buying it. And I actually kind of thought that was a done deal a few weeks ago, but I commented, well, I'm not going to necessarily say anything until I see the press release. Well, the press release is out, and it's Amazon. Amazon has purchased it. They are very interested in becoming more active in the gaming community. They've got some developers online that are making games for the Fire TV stuff and things like that. And this article basically is saying this is a really excellent way for Twitch to be Twitch and be much more. Amazon is the second biggest online game distribution system. It has broad licensing deals with music providers. All in all, like there's an incredible amount of synergy that could happen between Twitch and Amazon. Imagine if a Twitch streamer could put their gaming rig up on their page, and you could buy the gaming rig a particular streamer is using, and then that streamer, by promoting it, gets a piece of the profits. And so you can buy a gaming rig and support the Twitch streamer that you like.
Is that a big part of the Twitch community? People talking about what kind of rig they're currently playing on?
Yes, you will find that a lot of Twitch streamers will actually have the entire specs of their computer on the main page. That's
cool.
Yeah.
That makes so much sense.
And so there's a lot of stuff that can happen here, that is positive. And another thing is that Amazon is seeking to basically leave Twitch as it is for the most part. The Twitch CEO will still be the Twitch CEO. I don't think they're necessarily interested in co-opting the entire corporate structure. They are interested in being deeply involved and augmenting it. So I think that's kind of cool.
That's exciting.
I really think it is. And there was a lot of talk at PAX. I went to the partner panel where Twitch addressed the Twitch partners, and there was a lot of positivity there, and there were a lot of great ideas coming from the Twitch partners saying, hey, is this something that Amazon would be willing to do? Is this something Amazon would be willing to do? Hey, can we do this? Is this? And it seems like a far better idea than unifying all of online gaming video under one roof. YouTube has not necessarily handled the way gaming video is released on it with any adequacy. So I don't know. This seems like a good thing to me.
Right, like there, YouTube is focused on very specific things, and it would be such a huge undertaking to then develop a whole other set of technology for.
Well, but
for what
they've been moderately competing with Twitch a little bit. They've been introducing their own streaming services and things like that. But I think they wanted to acquire Twitch and be a big giant online gaming monopoly. I'm glad they did not. So this next one's kind of interesting. John Carmack did a talk about using the new Samsung Note 4 for VR. Basically, they're building a rig for the Note 4, and you basically take it and put it into it, and you have absolutely mobile VR technology, much like the Oculus. I think this is unbelievably exciting. I love that multiple groups are working on this technology, and the idea that you could take an existing piece of hardware, plug it into something else, and get an entirely new set of functionality is great. So I will provide a link to that in the show notes. Have you poked around with the Oculus stuff at all?
I've played with one once when I was at the Phoenix Comic-Con for a very short amount of time, and it was super fun. And I'm working with Emily Shift, the YouTube channel, on a project that may or may not involve some things that she's doing with the Oculus Rift, a kind of like VR like documentary kind of situation, like sort of think about like what would happen if you were making virtual, like a VR video, but of a YouTube video, like a sort of a vlog style thing. So her and Vi Hart are working on some stuff that is just, and a couple other people whose names are currently escape me.
Of course, that are always it's going to change the world. It's so awesome. It's awesome. So cool. And then I've got two more little things just to kind of shove in here that are really cool. First, Destiny's coming out soon, big space opera video game, and the company that's releasing it has put out the maps of, like, they've used Google Street View to make maps of the worlds that you can travel to with commentary and things like that. So you can go to the moon and travel down the walkways of the moon and see the environments that you're going to be playing this game in. It's kind of cool, and it has me way more excited about Destiny than I was at any other point in time. And the last thing I'm going to add, and since I do customer support work for Play Minecraft, this really made me laugh. Basically, it's a series of images called "What Happens When You Op Everyone on Your Server." Basically, a Minecraft server person decided to opt someone he barely knew, and then other people got upset, so he opt everyone on the server just to see what would happen. And basically the entire experience is hilarious, but at 42 minutes and 55 seconds he said, "I decided to stop the server forever." He has a backup, but it only took 42 minutes for him to realize that this was not a good thing.
So funny.
So, Mike, thank you again for doing the show. It is.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
It is. I feel like you're sort of a kindred spirit, and that you explore certain ideas with an amount of passion and energy that most people don't give it. I love your show. I love the things that you do, and I really appreciate how approachable that you've been to me with regard to just coming and spending an hour talking about nothing.
Hey, dude, it's my pleasure. We're not going to solve the world's problems, but we can at least talk about the ways that we think maybe they could be solved if people were nicer.
Yes. Do you have anything you want to pimp before you head out?
I just started a new podcast. It's called Reasonably Sound, and it's on a new podcasting network by American Public Media, APM, called Infinite Guest. So if you go to infiniteguest.org, you can listen to my new podcast that is about sound and audio stuff, like technology and theory and culture, and it's called Reasonably Sound.
That sounds incredible, and I will have to go and listen to it since I had all those technical difficulties at the beginning of the show.
Unfortunately, there's no audio gear advice, but maybe that can be a spin-off show at some point. I can call it. I can call it Sound Advice. Yes, that's a great idea.
So chat room, I'll stick around for a little bit and talk with you guys. I'm sorry I wasn't able to dig into the chat all that much, but I was really enthralled with the discussions that we're having. I do have some potential guests on the horizon. I met a lot of people at PAX. Hopefully, I will be putting out material weekly again soon, and you guys have a great time.
You've been listening to Core Elements, exploring gaming one element at a time, a listener-supported podcast. See the show notes or get more information at coreelementshow.com or leave us a voicemail at 256-763-0455.